Thank you, listeners, for joining us today on Ask the Expert. My name is Neil Ulm of Sprott Money News, and we're very excited to have the pleasure of speaking with Al Korelin this morning. Al Korelin is the founder of the Korelin Economics Report, an internationally syndicated business radio program, which has been on the air for the past 17 years. He's also the founder of A.B. Korelin Associates, which focuses on helping companies who wish to trade their stocks in the United States. With this, I am pleased to welcome Al Korelin this morning. Hi, Al.
Pleasure to be here. How you doing back in Toronto?
We're doing well. It's a gorgeous day here. It's about 60 degrees Fahrenheit, which is very warm. I actually just hit a couple of balls at the golf course to practice my swing. But nonetheless, let's get into the questions here from our customers and our mutual beneficiaries here. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. I know that you just spoke at the San Francisco Hard Assets Conference. Can you give us a quick recap of your presentation, please?
Sure, I'm happy to. I spoke for about 15 minutes down there. They asked me to give, talk about how my family and I invest, and I did that, and I stressed a number of things, and just to kind of put this, simplistically, for lack of it, not simplistically necessarily, but concisely. Number one, I'm a real believer in diversification, and as such, I explained to the folks in the audience that we have about 25% of our money in real estate, about 25% of our money in the conventional stock market, and then the remaining 50% is in hard assets. And then within that 50% segment, it's a combination, because as I said, I believe in diversification, and it's a combination of both investing in the commodities themselves, gold and silver specifically, and also investing in the securities in that particular sector. And within that area, we're probably about, I would say 40% invested in the securities, and then another 10%. About 85% invested in the securities, and then about 15% in the commodities themselves.
Okay, great. One of our readers is an accredited director for credit unions in Canada, and he'd like to leverage that knowledge by getting more involved in a couple of his junior mining investments at the director level. Do you have any tips on how to become a director with a public company?
I do, and I thought about that a little bit earlier today. I have served on the board of directors of a number of companies, got my studio dog here, of a number of companies, and the one that was a very, very good experience for me was I was on the board of directors of a publicly traded bank in the United States. That was a very positive experience. In terms of mining companies, you want to be very careful which companies you get involved in, because it's a little more of a Wild West atmosphere at one end of that particular spectrum. I have had very, very good experiences, certainly, but I've also had some pretty negative experiences. One that comes to mind is sat on the board of 3 companies. The officers never bothered to tell us as directors. They never kept us up to date as to what was going on, and I ended up resigning from that company from those companies, I should say, because, as a director, you have to realize you've got some fairly serious fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders, and if you don't take that very seriously, you don't belong in that position. I would say for this client of yours, simply have him put together what he has to offer to the various companies, and then find companies that he's interested in being involved in, and away you go.
Okay. Great. You kind of touched on this earlier when we reviewed what you presented at the San Francisco conference, but a lot of our listeners are avid about buying and holding physical precious metals. In your opinion, what % of your portfolio would you recommend investing in physical bullion?
I personally, and I put my money where my mouth is along those lines, I think probably 10% is a very, very safe number. I know that your colleagues, John Embry and Eric and Rick and the rest of them may feel a little bit differently, but I think that 10% is a very sensible percentage to have.
10%, okay. Switching over to politics, because we just didn't get enough of it with the U.S. election over the last year and a half here. The next question, with Obama being reelected, how do you think this would impact the economy and the gold and silver markets?
Real simple. Obviously, we've dealt with that on our show ad nauseum, and we continue to deal with it. I think it's a very, very important consideration in the sectors that you're talking about. I think ultimately, I don't ever speak short term. I always speak mid to long term, and I think that with the direction our country is going right now, with the administration's agenda, I think it's very, very positive for the resource sector, and I think you're going to see both gold and silver appreciate significantly. In terms of the securities, I think they're going to follow suit. I really, really do. Short term, anybody's guess. Mid to long term, I got to tell you, my friend, we're in big trouble down here. And as Bob Moriarty told me years and years ago, people are going to want to buy things, and those things are gold and silver.
Interesting. And what effect will the crisis in the Middle East have on commodities? Maybe you could touch on oil in addition to gold and silver.
Well, I'm a real student of the Middle East in the sense that particular part of the world it's a very frustrating part of the world, but it's a very interesting part of the world, to say the least. As of right now, we seem to have a bit of a stalemate. Now, that's as of Tuesday, afternoon in your case, morning in my case. Price of oil seems to be going down a little bit today. Price of gold and silver, they doesn't seem to know where it wants to go. I think in the short term, the crisis in the Middle East could be very, very positive, certainly for oil, and I think also for gold and silver.
Wonderful. You also you kind of touched on this before, but you said that you're looking at things, or you can talk about things in midterm to long-term predictions. Do you have any predictions for the price of gold and silver in the near term?
I hate to sidestep the question. I hate to not answer the question, but near term, I think it's anybody's guess. There are too many inputs out there. Am I an investor in the resource sector? Very definitely. So I guess my answer is I'm optimistic. But again, my time frame is midterm.
Okay, so let's talk about the Korelin Economics Report and A&B Korelin Associates for a moment. Could you tell our listeners about the history of your business and the work that you've done through them?
We began doing reporting for publicly traded companies to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission back in 1982. As luck would have it, we ended up specializing in working with primarily mining companies. We did, over a course of probably 25 years, we did somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 or 700 SEC registrations, which allowed our clients to facilitate trading in the United States. Many of our clients went on and listed on the the NASDAQ system, the Big Board, the New York system, etc. In roughly 1995, I began doing radio just as an avocation, for lack of better terms. I changed the entire focus of the radio program in 2001 to asset-based investing because, with my background in economics and finance, etc., I just didn't see the economy working out as many people hoped. Many of my friends at the time, in the late 90s, very early part of this decade, lost upwards of 50% of their retirement savings because they were invested in silly things. They were invested in, quote unquote, the new paradigm high-tech companies. That didn't make any sense to me. So I began discussing hard assets. That evolved into bringing politics into the center stage, for lack of better terms, because I think there's a real correlation between political events on an international level, not just a domestic level for me, but on an international level, and investing in hard assets. I think the two go hand in hand. And, a lot of people seem to agree with us because on the internet alone, we've got about 170,000 listeners every month, and then we're on probably 24 radio stations down here.
That's fantastic. Last but not least, our listeners want to know what conferences you'll be speaking at in the next few months so they can go and see you or listen to you on the radio.
Well, you can listen. You can listen on the radio on the weekends. The show, the Korelin Economics Report, is a 2-hour program that airs Saturday or Sunday, depending on the city that you're in. We put everything on the internet. We podcast, etc. So if they want to listen on their computers, that's very easy to do. Simply go to our website, www.kereport.com. In terms of upcoming conferences, I will be at the the Vancouver Cambridge House Conference the end of January. I'll be at Cambridge House in Indian Wells, which is basically the Palm Springs area. I will then be at PDAC, and then I will be speaking at the Standard Charter Bank Conference in Hong Kong in June.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time this afternoon, Al, and we look forward to speaking with you soon. Thanks again.
It's a pleasure, man.